Ladies and gentlemen, I told you Democrats are going to get more aggressive, desperate, and more unhinged after the Supreme Court pulled the emergency brake on their redistricting games. And here we are in short order. They are proving me to be right on point. Because the second the court stopped letting them use race-based maps as their political safety net, the meltdown had begun. And so now it's Jim Crow this, racism that. And according to the left, get this, nothing has changed in this country as it relates to race issues in the past 130 years. You cannot make this up. It got so bad that on CNN, Abby Phillips, of all people, had to literally stop the show because one of the panelists completely lost it and with full-blown oppression obsession. And so as always, if you enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up. That's the best way you can let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with all the future videos. Let's start right here.
Virginia Democratic leaders are going to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to overturn a state ruling striking down their new gerrymandered congressional map. The 4-3 decision at the Virginia Supreme Court, found that the Democratic-controlled legislature violated the Commonwealth's Constitution by not following clear and simple rules for a public vote on a constitutional amendment. It's unclear tonight whether the Supreme Court will even take up the case. The Supreme Court has vacated a lower court order blocking Alabama from pursuing new congressional maps. The practical impact of that decision is that Alabama can move forward with redistricting efforts, having passed new maps on Friday. That sets the stage for Alabama to get rid of one of two largely black congressional districts before this year's midterm elections. The decision follows a Supreme Court ruling in April that struck down a majority black U.S. House district in Louisiana as unconstitutional as racial gerrymandering.
And so now the Supreme Court is not allowing Democrats to simply demand districts be drawn based on race. The left is completely unraveling, ladies and gentlemen. And now we're watching them run full speed ahead with their oppression obsession as they try and work the angle of this is supposedly an attack on the black community, black voters being disenfranchised. And that takes us to CNN, where you have Bakari Sellers. He went full race hustler mode, claiming there's basically no difference between, get this, black people in 1896 and what black people have to go through today. Think about how insane that is. It's almost as if the only way they know how to operate is if they are constantly reminding black people they are victims and diminishing everything that has been accomplished throughout the decades in this country because victimhood is the political product to the left. Check it out.
Ashley and I have to wrestle with the fact that we are going to be the first generation to actually leave this country worse than the one that we inherited. And I think for black millennials, the progress that our parents and grandparents gave us that we're watching being ripped away from us is something that our generation is going to have to really wrestle with in figuring out how we get out of this conundrum. If somebody fell asleep in 1896 and woke up today in 2026, they would simply say the only difference is now Negroes have a TV show and we wear nice suits. They swapped out Klan hoods for Brooks Brothers suits. And that is the problem. I mean, Plessy v. Ferguson was 7-1, and it gave birth to 50 years of Jim Crow. What we have with this court right now, what we're seeing is watching people who have fought and died and bled so that we would have access to the ballot box, so that we would have access to our voices being heard in Congress, being ripped away. And I think that there is a casual laughter from people we believe to be our friends on the right who are showing us true colors today, because the most sacred, or one of the most sacred acts you have in the United States of America is the ability to cast a ballot and elect someone and send them to Congress, the State House, or a mayoral seat that represents your interest. And now black folks throughout the South are being silenced. And I don't find that to be a laughing matter.
Democrats act like this ruling means black voters are being thrown back into 1896. That is political theater at its finest. Supreme Court saying congressional maps cannot be built primarily around race. That doesn't mean that the black vote is being silent, like Bakari Sellers wants you to believe, or that black people are losing their right to vote, or will no longer have access to a ballot. What? And then he goes on talking about how people marched, fought, bled for, died in the civil rights era. Okay, but yeah, you can still register to vote as a black person. You can still vote. You can still run for office. And yes, win districts that are majority white and diverse districts too, which black politicians do pretty well. On top of that, black voters, they still have their rights intact. They can still go out and vote Democrat 90% and expect nothing but shaking and twerking for their blind loyalty, despite being worse off, due in part to poor political decisions made year after year, decade after decade. And so black voters have not lost any political power. The Democrat Party has lost the power. But if you ask Cory Booker, he seems to think the Supreme Court got it wrong also. Take a listen.
Well, the Supreme Court has gotten it wrong generation after generation. The rights we enjoy right now are not because of 9 people on the Supreme Court. It's because people fought for them. And where the Supreme Court usually gets it wrong is when they're taking away rights, whether it's Korematsu with the internment of Japanese, whether it's Plessy versus Ferguson denying rights to African Americans, whether it's Dobbs. They got it wrong taking away rights for women to control what happens to their bodies. And here we have again the Supreme Court taking away rights, equality, fair representation, and fair voting. Doing in result the exact same thing happened when Reconstruction fell in the 1870s. And exactly what happened then is state legislators moved to take away rights and access and fairness and representation from black people.
A race-based district is not a constitutional right, even though Cory Booker wants it to be, it sounds like. It was a tool, and we should be honest enough to admit that at one point in this country's history, it was a necessary tool. Yes, to protect black voters from being shut out of the political process. But the question now is, why is the left fighting so hard to keep it forever? Because today, politicians can win without majority black districts. But now let's go back to CNN. Check this out.
I heard you say that people are losing representation. People are losing their voice. No voter has lost their voice at all. No one's been disenfranchised. Every voter in America before these court rulings could go cast a ballot this November, and every voter in America, white, black, or otherwise, can go cast a ballot right now. The lines may be changing, but every voter still has the same amount of voting power, one vote, that they had. It's just that this Supreme Court said your race doesn't necessarily have to dictate your political identity. The fact that you're an American citizen and your franchise gives you one vote, that is your political identity. And it is incumbent upon both parties, Republicans and Democrats, to run people who speak not to just one constituency, but all American interests. To me, that's how the November election should be run.
Please.
Go ahead, Ashley.
I might agree with you if they hadn't said something different 3 years ago. We aren't talking about in Alabama a district that existed when my grandmother was alive. We're talking about a district that was drawn in 2023 because there are injustices that are still being placed. We're talking about Memphis, where we're not like, it's not just one person across the street. They split a whole city into 3 to make black voters have less power in House maps.
Let's go ahead and take a little trip down memory lane, because when Democrats redrew the maps in Virginia, the same maps that were recently struck down, they drew them in a way that took what many would consider the D.C. suburbs because of how close that part of Virginia is to Washington, D.C., and they cracked those areas into 6, 7 different districts. They then took those districts and stretched them from the D.C. suburbs down into parts of Virginia where you are more likely to find rural white voters. Shocker. Now, at no point did the left cry and complain that those liberal suburban voters would dilute the voting power of those rural white voters. Matter of fact, if I recall, they were celebrating it. Hakeem Jeffries was poking his chest out big time, talking about FAFO, right? Remember, he was sounding tougher than Denzel in Training Day. At no point did Democrats cry about diluted white votes. And that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Their outrage is fake. It's kind of annoying for people who don't see it. I don't know how you don't, but they're using the emotion of black voters and historical references to try and drive the conversation. They're trying to make this about hate, racism, and bigotry because they know that language works with their base, basically. But this is not about protecting black voters. This is about only protecting Democrat power. And instead of admitting that, they're using the black community as a political tool to deliver their message. Shocker. Like we haven't seen this one before. But let's continue.
The Voting Rights Act, which actually was the last time it actually was reauthorized, was under your boss, George W. Bush. It used to be a bipartisan thing. It used to be clear that the backdrop of this country, there is discrimination now. There was pervasive discrimination when the law was signed into law during the Civil Rights Movement. We can all go into our partisan corners, but to act like what is happening right now is not a direct attack on Black voters' power, Black voters' ability to represent themselves. Now, we had this conversation yesterday, Scott. Black voters are allowed to elect whoever they want. And in 2024, they did. They elected a Black Democrat in that new district in Alabama. That Black Democrat went through a primary of 13 people, and Black voters found the agency to come and decide how that primary now will be erased. And put a Black Republican up in that district if you want Black voters to have a choice. But they're not. That's not what's happening. It is a dissemination, of distribution of Black power. And to call it anything other than that, I just think is being historically ignoring the past of our country and pretending like we're not trying to drive our country to a different type of future.
From now on, whenever you hear the left say that what the Supreme Court is doing is an attack on Black political power, just replace the word Black with Democrat, and it'll all make a lot more sense, because that's what this is really about. But let's get to the next part, where Bakari Sellers goes on an unhinged tirade, unlocking his full oppression obsession final boss mode. Check it out.
We might live in a country where all around the country, we have states where the minority political party has effectively zero representation in Congress.
I think everybody should take confidence in the fact the Supreme Court basically supported one vote, one person, guaranteed in perpetuity. And the rest is just map wars. And I think we should get used to it. And I think it's, as you said, a state-based situation. Add this to the mix. At the end of the day, the state decides at the state level. It's in the Constitution. Get over it.
So the problem with that sentiment is that you were born in 1954.
Yeah.
Okay, you're
Very popular
You're
that
71.
Yeah.
Right. In 1954.
By the way, I'm a vampire. I'm never gonna die,
during your lifetime, we've actually had Brown v. Board of Education.
I remember.
Yeah, Brown v. Board of Education. I don't know how you remember it. I think you were like 2 months old. But I'm not finished yet. Let me finish my thought.
Drill back to 54.
Yeah, because you're still alive, right? And so there's an entire generation of people. Brown v. Board, it overturned Plessy v. Ferguson of 1896. My point is that my mother was born in 1951. She desegregated schools. My father was shot in the Civil Rights Movement. Those people.
Let him finish.
I'm going to finish because you're being utterly disrespectful.
Not at all.
So I'm going to finish this comment. So what I'm telling you is that there are people in this country who fought, died, and bled for the right to vote. Don't be a dick. Just understand.
Okay. Bakari,
please.
I'm not understand. A dick. I'm pointing something out to you. The Constitution is being upheld. Do you have a problem with that? Do you have a problem with the Constitution of the United States of America?
Bakari, I'm going to stop you because I just want everybody to reset with a modicum of respect at this table. Please stop.
Bakari Sellers is out here selling race hustler tickets. That's what he's doing. Bringing up a time period he never lived through and trying to gain emotional leverage instead of making a real argument. Kevin O'Leary is trying to have a fact-based conversation. Bakari was stuck in emotion. And honestly, what point was he even trying to make? It sounded less like an actual argument and more like, how do I keep people trapped in this victim lane? That's what this is. Keep people angry, afraid, and convinced that they are oppressed. Keep the oppression obsession alive. Because as long as Black people believe nothing has changed, they will keep voting the same way, listening to the same people, and accepting the same excuses. But here's the irony, ladies and gentlemen, that the left does not seem to understand. When you have somebody like Bakari Sellers basically saying there's no difference between Black America in 1896 and Black America today, they're making an argument against themselves and don't even realize it. Because if nothing has changed, if Black people are still in this same destitute, horrible position after decades of voting overwhelmingly Democrat, then what exactly has that loyalty delivered? If Democrats are the party that supposedly cares so much about Black voters, Black people, and yet Bakari's saying nothing has changed, that is not an indictment of what Republicans have been doing these past decades. That's an indictment of the political machine black voters have been loyal to for generations. And so maybe it's time for things to change. Break up these race-based districts. Make it a fair fight. Stop allowing gerrymandered racial maps to function as guaranteed Democrat seats. Because according to Bakari, it cannot get much worse anyway, right? Let's continue.
I want you to understand
That's
that there is a
Mr.
price.
Get to you, by the way.
There's a price that was paid for this right. There is a price that we uphold, and whether or not
Where are
you
you going
value
with
that,
this?
whether or not you value that or not, there are people who bled, sweat, and died and were imprisoned for access to the ballot box. And what we're
They still
seeing
have access.
what we're seeing throughout the South is that their voice, their vote, their representation, and people who have lived experiences to represent them are not being sent to Congress or where they need to go.
This debate, by the way, is happening among the justices. If you look at the Louisiana decision, the conservatives are saying, we've made great progress. It's time to let go of this, of using racial discrimination.
And that's why I utilize the description of
And the liberal justices say exactly what you just said, Bakari, which is there's a history here that we're overlooking.
But Ellie,
Yeah.
I mean, the 3 years have passed since 2023
Yeah.
and 2026.
Exactly.
So that's
It's not that long.
All of a sudden, the country has made that
much progress?
in
And
3 years.
that's the criticism of the majority. Look, there's a famous quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? When the
should have
Voting Rights
retired,
Act
but
came.
go
What's that?
Who should have retired?
When the Voting Rights Act came up, when she was on the bench, she said, the conservatives said, well, we've made great progress, so we don't need this anymore. She said, I'm paraphrasing, but she said, that's like getting rid of your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet.
Yes.
And the question is it still raining? Is it drizzling? Is it clear? People differ strongly on that.
And guess what? It can be clear one day and rain the next. And so that's the inconsistency.
and the crazy part is, go ahead.
I just want to point out the one person, one vote. I think, Bakari, us millennials will have to wrestle with how we're going to leave this earth, and I'm determined to leave it better than I found it. And I think that this decision is actually going to open a rush to reevaluate a lot of things, like you say, are in the Constitution. Because right now you have a hat on that says Utah, and they have more representation in the Senate than the people actually in Alabama have
I
in
got
the
a
Senate.
situation in Utah going on.
I know that's not why you have the hat on.
No, I
but
have it on.
You have it on, and so there are states right
I'm
now that have
supporting
two
the people of
senators.
Utah.
When we're sitting in a state right now that has more population than Utah multiplied by 10, and so if we
You
really
don't like
want to
Utah?
talk about,
I love Utah.
I'm talking about all the states that have smaller populations. If we really want to talk about one person, one vote, and if we really want to go down a path to see what real franchise means, you might have just opened a discussion that this country should be is timely to actually have.
And so I'm gonna leave it here. As long as black voters keep voting Democrat at a 90% clip, something you do not see from any other group, not even women vote at that clip, Democrats will keep pushing these emotional, race-driven talking points. But let's be honest, they could not care any less about voting rights the way they claim. Let black voters turn around and start voting Republican in large numbers that don't lock in Democrat power the way it currently does. Let that happen and see. Watch and see what happens. Democrats will drop this entire political act like a bad habit. But those are my thoughts on the update. Now let me hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Smash that thumbs up button if you enjoy the content. And subscribe for more. And as always, until next time.